So how many Teslas actually get replaced by gasoline vehicles? Well, according to Edmunds in this article, it's more than half of all Teslas traded in. However, there is a problem with their data, as I said in yesterday's video. Now, fortunately today, I have a whole lot more information and a better picture of exactly how many Teslas got traded in for gasoline cars. Let's take a deeper dive into the data from S&P Global Mobility. Big shout out to one of our viewers who has access to the S&P Global Mobility data, which is the gold standard and treasure trove of what happens to vehicles in North America. Before we dive into the numbers, I should say how Edmunds data comes about and how this data comes about. So Edmunds said in their article that this is from dealership data, but they didn't talk about how big the data set is, how many vehicles they were talking about. I'm going to be talking about that with the S&P data, but again, only from dealerships. S&P Global Mobility, they get their data in a different way. They are actually looking at vehicle registration data in the United States. If you didn't know it, your vehicle registration data is not private. It is available to people that pay states for that treasure trove of data. And S&P Global Mobility basically takes the data set and they look at what households own what, and then whether that car leaves the household and what it gets replaced with. And this includes not just dealership trades like the Edmunds data theoretically does, but any way that a vehicle ends up leaving the house and then a new vehicle registration enters the house. We're talking new vehicles here. So I own a Tesla. It is now 4 years old. I sold it. I gave it away. It got crashed and totaled. The lease ended, whatever the reason it left my house. And then a month later, I replace it with something else. That's what this data set contains. So let's just dive right into these numbers. It's not 51% leaving to a gasoline car. It is actually, drum roll please here, just 13%. In fact, 70% of Tesla shoppers that disposed of a Tesla from January 1st, 2023 to February 29th, 2024 replaced that Tesla with another Tesla. Now, why the 14-month window? Because we want to be sure that we capture what happened in 2023. And sometimes it takes a while for the data sets to sync up and for a vehicle to be removed from the database and the new vehicle to be added. So that's why we have that 14-month window there. So in 2023, 80% plus of Teslas that were disposed of were replaced with another EV. 70% with another Tesla, 11% with some other EV out there, 13% with a gasoline vehicle. And if we dig a little bit deeper into that, according to the S&P Mobility data, we can actually tell where those customers went. And a large portion of those customers went to brands that simply do not have an EV in the lineup, for whatever reason that may be. BMW and Mercedes had the biggest pickup. And it appears that maybe these customers were going to a different format of vehicle that was simply not offered. And we can sort of tell that a little bit by some of the other brands and vehicles where these customers ended up. Because if we take a look at this data a little bit closer, we can tell by this data, for instance, that 1.2% of Tesla owners that did not go back to another Tesla went to Ram. And Ram is a pickup truck brand. We can make a very similar assumption with GMC. 1.3% of shoppers went to GMC. And that's a brand that, while they do sell SUVs, they certainly don't have anything in the lineup that is a corollary to a Tesla. So customers were kind of looking for something different. Same thing goes for the people that went to McLaren or to Aston Martin or to Alfa Romeo. These manufacturers don't have the same sort of thing in their lineup that we see in the rest. On the other hand, we can also see that a reasonable number of these Tesla shoppers that left the brand went to another EV-only brand like Lucid or especially Rivian. Rivian took 9.8% of the conquests from Tesla in that period. That's a pretty significant number. And that's another reason that we shouldn't look at some of these Edmunds numbers for this particular situation, because Teslas are direct sales, Rivians are direct sales, so are Lucids, etc. So they're never going to be really pictured or really accounted for properly in dealer-only data like we find from them. Now, the plug-in hybrid percentage, that was a lot smaller than I had thought here. So plug-in hybrids, that's just 2% of the leaving Tesla window, and 1% of shoppers went to diesel. It was only 393 customers went and got a diesel vehicle. But in the moment, in the United States, diesels serve a very different function. So they're by and large trucks, especially 3/4 ton and 1 ton trucks, although you can still buy GM's diesel in their half-ton truck. And of course, you can get diesels in a limited number of other format vehicles like big SUVs. Unlike other reporting on EV trade-ins, we need to start qualifying this chart and these numbers here. 60,000 trade-ins does not sound like an enormous amount. And indeed, it's not a huge amount of disposals. And we're talking, again, disposals, the general term for trade-ins, sales, lease ends, etc. It's not an enormous amount. But the important thing to remember is that the vast majority of Teslas have been sold in the last 4 years. In fact, 80% of all Teslas sold from the start of Tesla to December 31st, 2023 were sold in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023, with about 75% of them being sold just in that 3-year window. So the majority of customers, they're not ready to get rid of their brand new car. That's the important thing to remember. So when we're taking a look at any of these trade-in numbers, whether we're talking about Edmunds data or even this S&P Global Mobility number, which is, again, really the gold standard as far as who's doing what with their used vehicle, we're not talking about the current crop of Teslas. We're basically talking mostly about Model S's and Model X's, those older Teslas. What has that Tesla shopper done as far as the replacement for that particular vehicle? There's going to be some number, especially in the 2019, 2020, maybe 2021 window, where people have ended a lease depending on the lease length, or maybe they're just selling their 3-year-old or their 4-year-old Tesla. There's definitely a number there, but we probably will have a better picture of exactly what the Tesla shopper does for their next vehicle in about 3 years' time, because in 3 years' time, we will have a solid set of years worth of data here where Tesla has been selling more than 500,000 cars a year, and then those cars will age out as far as leases, or maybe the average ownership cycle of, say, 5 to 6 years, etc. We'll have a better idea at that point. So keep in mind this data set is relatively limited. However, it is certainly not the 51% that Edmunds said it was. And it didn't pass my smell test. And actually, if I take a look at this number, I was only off by about 1% versus my guess yesterday. Because Tesla's loyalty rate is really high. We knew that to begin with. So even if we discounted Edmunds data by saying that is just the segment of this pie that is traded to a dealer, and then we take a look at that percentage and knock it down or so, it basically replicates what we're talking about here. So if anybody out there is saying, hey, Tesla owners really don't like their Tesla and they decide they want to, go back to gasoline, sure, some people do. Now, we don't know why they do that, but again, we can take a look at the data and we can see that some of them are moving to a different type of vehicle. Remember, Tesla offers 2 sedans, 2 SUVs, and a pickup truck. And the pickup truck is not in this data because it's pretty darn new. And even though they have a truck, they don't have a truck that's going to tow long distances. They don't have a 3/4 ton truck. They don't have a 1 ton truck. They don't have a van. They don't have a big boxy SUV. They don't have a sleek and sexy roadster. They don't have any of those other kinds of vehicles we find in other competitive brands. So the reason that some people leave may simply because they needed a minivan, or they needed a big SUV, or whatever their family need might be. It's not necessarily because they just didn't want an EV. We actually can't tell yes or no from this data. We have no idea at all. Now, be sure and let me know what you think about all that down there in the comments section below. And of course, find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., all those other social places, because oftentimes we will post stories like this in advance over at facebook.com, so we can make sure we have all of our I's dotted and our T's crossed and all of those things are done. I will tell you that I accidentally, swapped some numbers on this little pie chart here in advance. Was able to fix that thanks to our proofreading process. The post hadn't gone up live on Facebook, so I'm outing myself here. Unfortunately, probably shouldn't have done that. Anyway, so let us know what you think about all that down there. And are there other news stories that kind of have you a little upset out there? You can also let us know by dropping us a note. You can always email us at hey@autobuyersguide.com and let us know what's out there. See all of you later.